Welcome to a Sad Boys book review. My name is Dusty, and I read Elantris almost a year ago. So, this is my first of playing catch up for my 2023 reads outside of the standard Sad Boys Book Club books that we covered. And yeah, the first one to catch up is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. I finished this back in May of 2023, and I really liked it. I thought it was a very fun book. It was my very first Sanderson book, and I have to admit, I get the hype surrounding him. I know he's either the greatest modern fantasy author ever or a hack that you just don't understand why anyone likes him, and I don't think I'm in either extreme, but I was thoroughly impressed by Elantris. I had a great time reading it. I really enjoyed the character writing. I enjoyed the plot. I enjoyed the magic system, and yeah, it was really cool, and it made me a Sanderson fan. So I'm going to do my best to keep this about as spoiler free as I can because this is a book that I would recommend reading yourself, and I will try my best to stick to only the general premise of the book and some kind of abstract thoughts about it. The background information for Elantris is that 10 years prior to the start of the novel, there was the city of Elantris, and it was this booming magical city where people were blessed with the powers of Elantris randomly throughout their life. They would wake up and boom, they would have the blessing and they would become an Elantrian. It was ostensibly a magical transformation. You became seemingly immortal. You had access to all of these crazy, amazing magical abilities. You got to go live in the bright, shining city of Elantris, where it seemed like everything was perfect and utopian, and everything was amazing. But 10 years ago, a force of nature, so to say, happened, and the blessing of Elantris suddenly became a curse. No longer were these people able to have access to this incredible magic or any of these fantastical things that they were able to do. The city started to go into complete and total disrepair. The society broke down, and the once thought of as powerful and immortal citizens of Elantris became this seemingly undead husk where they didn't ever truly die, but they were no longer alive, and any wounds suffered would never heal and would linger forever. And so that's kind of where Elantris starts, is it's been 10 years since that happened, and the blessing of Elantris is now seen as a curse. And throughout this book, we are primarily in the kingdom of Arelon, which is where Elantris is, and we are in the town, the capital of Arelon, which sits basically neighboring Elantris. The walls of Elantris are in the city, more or less. There might be a bit of a walk to get there, but it's on like the outskirts of the city. And we follow three major characters. We have Prince Raoden, the Prince of Arelon, who wakes up with the curse of Elantris and is exiled to the city to die, or to not die, but wither away as an Elantrian. And his fate is covered up by what they say is a sudden death. And so his storyline mostly revolves around what is going on inside of Elantris and him trying to solve the mystery of what happened and maybe find a way to actually live again despite the curse. Our second character is Princess Serene, who comes from the kingdom of Teod, and I apologize now if I mispronounce anything based on Sanderson's pronunciation guides. I tried my best. I looked through them, and I think I had a grasp on it, but I'm not the best, as people might know at this point. So if I don't say anything correctly or I say it differently than you, sorry. I know that Serene's official name is something like Serene or Serene or something like that, and even Sanderson pronounces it Serene. So, my thought process is take it with a grain of salt and do whatever works for you. And I think he seems to have a similar mindset towards pronunciations himself. So, anyways, I called it Teod personally. If you called it something else, I'm sure you're just as correct as I am, or you're more correct than I am. Doesn't really matter. It is the kingdom that is across the ocean to the north of Arelon, and she is traveling to Arelon because she is in an arranged marriage with Raoden. But there is an interesting bit of fine print in her marriage contract that says that if anything happens to Raoden before the wedding day, it is as though the wedding has already happened and she is considered a widow, which is very convenient. And at first I thought, oh, this might be some sort of conspiracy, but I really do think it's just kind of a convenience for the plot to get her character situated for her story. But despite having never met him in person and not get married to him, Serene is a widow and now also the princess of Arelon by proxy. And our third character is our villain of the novel, and I'm using that term relatively loosely. He is the antagonist, I guess is a better way to put it. He's the antagonist to Serene, and his name is Hrathen, and he comes from the kingdom to the east, who is ruled by this emperor, whose name I've kind of forgotten. It's something like Wyrm or Wyrm, or like something kind of like that. I'm sorry, it's been almost a year since I've read the book, so forgive me that names are not quite where they used to be. And they are a very religious-based kingdom, and he is the title for him is a Gyorn. So I think it's Gyorn, and the way that they kind of label their religion is they are Derethi. So he is a Derethi priest, for lack of a better term, that has been sent to Arelon in order to convert the kingdom to his religion and the religion of his kingdom, so that they will be ready for conquest, because this kingdom in the east has been conquering other lands and has also conquered the land to the south already, and has already done a complete and total religious takeover of that land as well. So that's what he's there to do. He's there to convert them so that there won't be a need for bloodshed. He's given a time period of 1 month to do so. Otherwise, the emperor is going to send his army to do it by force. So those are our three characters, and that is the premise that gets the plot going for each of them. And from there, we have this really nice kind of political slow burn plot. There's really not a lot of action until we get into the final 50 to 80 pages of the book. And it's a decently long book. I don't remember how many pages there were, but I think they were somewhere in the ballpark of 500 to 600 pages. Maybe a little more than. And so, yeah, a lot of it is very slow burn. A lot of Serene and Hrathen stories interact because they are the antithesis to each other. He is the antagonist to her storyline, and they butt heads a lot, and their stories interact almost constantly. And it's this nice game, political game of cat and mouse, where they're both trying to just kind of upstage each other to get their own goals in place. Meanwhile, Raoden's story, like I said earlier, is more so about the living conditions of Elantris and for the Elantrians, and him trying to find a way to provide a better life, not only for himself given his new fate, but the life of all of the Elantrians in the city. And all of these stories intertwine and lead to what I think is a really great climax that, once again, I'm going to keep this about as spoiler-free as I can, out of respect for anyone who might want to read the book, because I highly recommend it. I think it was very good. And I really liked the ending, personally. I think it was very satisfying. I liked what happened with all the characters. I think every character had a really great arc and had some really great character moments that really exemplified why they deserved to be one of the main perspective characters in this novel. And yeah, it was a really good book. I highly recommend it. I know a lot of people don't recommend starting with Elantris. They'll say start with Mistborn, which is another book that I finished in 2023, and I will make a video on soon, hopefully. And while I can see why people would want you to start with Mistborn, because I'm going to throw a little spoiler here on my thoughts on it and say that, in my opinion, it is indeed the better book of the two. I don't quite like the idea of setting yourself up with a really high standard right off the bat, and then eventually getting to a lower standard, relatively speaking, and then feeling possibly a form of like disappointment because you're like, oh well, it wasn't as good as Mistborn, so I don't think I liked it as much as I. Yeah, it just kind of creates this kind of narrative I feel sometimes. So for me, I'm going more so in release order for Sanderson. So I wanted to start with his first published book, which was Elantris. So with all of that in mind, I personally felt it was better to start with Elantris for me because that was his first published book, and because people say it's not as good as his later releases, so that I get to see what people consider to be, I don't want to say like a low for Sanderson because that makes it sound like this book isn't as good as it is, but relatively speaking, one of the lesser Sanderson products, so that I have about as unbiased of an opinion going into it as I can, and from there, as far as I can tell, based on the general opinion of Sanderson on the internet, there's nowhere to go but up from here. So that was kind of my thought process, and that's how I'm kind of approaching his bibliography, is kind of going a little bit by release order, but I'm going to kind of take it series at a time, kind of. I don't know, I'm not really sure yet. I've only really read this and Mistborn so far. But yeah, that's kind of all I can really say about Elantris at this point without really getting into spoiler territory, which, like I said, I really don't want to do because this is a book that I would highly recommend, and I don't want to give out any more information than I should in order to give someone a recommendation to read it. I really enjoyed it. The magic system was very cool. I know Sanderson is known almost for the most part because of his magic systems, how intricate and complex they can be, but how rewarding they are. And I did really enjoy the one in Elantris. I thought it was very cool. It had a lot of neat gimmicks to it that led to what could possibly be some very creative and inventive ways of using the magic system to perform magical feats. It feels like magic, not just some sort of like convenience that extends to a superhuman kind of ability. It felt like actual magic, if that makes sense. I don't really know how best to describe it. And yeah, like I said, the character writing was phenomenal. If anybody has listened to any of the episodes of the Sad Boys Book Club, you might know that I'm a major fan of character writing. It is one of my favorite things. I love a story that's about characters and good character writing more so than a good plot, though that is always very welcome as well. So good character writing is always a plus for me, and I think Elantris is a perfect example of good character writing. I'm not going to say great or perfect or the best character writing. I don't know if I would go as far as to say that, but I would say at the very least it is good character writing that is entertaining, and I was never really bored throughout. And while the structure of the novel was set in such a way that we were alternating between a Raoden, Serene, and then Hrathen chapter, and then going back and forth every 3 chapters, the thing that was really great about it, and this is something that I've talked about before with other things in the past that do a great job of your characters, is I would finish the chapter for one character and be really bummed because I wanted to stay with that character, and I wanted to really hurry up and get back to that character so I could continue with their story, because it left off on a point to where I was like, yes, I want more of this story, I want more of these characters. But while I'm reading the next chapter with the next character, that feeling comes back again. And by the time I finish that next character's chapter, I'm like, oh man, but this story was really good too, and I want to hurry up and get back to the next Hrathen chapter or the next Raoden chapter and see what continues on for there. And then it just keeps going and going and going to where you get into the chapter for the next character, and you're just excited to be reading that character's chapter, and then excited to get to it again. But it's just a multiplying effect throughout the entire book. And the pacing is very good, I feel, personally. Like I said earlier, it's a very character-driven kind of political drama, so it's a bit of a slow burn. It's a very slow book, but I'm okay with that personally. Those are things that I really enjoy. But yeah, I don't really know if there's much else I can really say without, like I said, going into spoilers. So with that, my final thoughts on Elantris was, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great introduction to Sanderson's writing style and his world, And while it may not be his best book, and a lot of people might put it near the bottom of a Sanderson tier list or something like that, I really enjoyed it for what it was, and it only made me more excited to start Mistborn, which was what I always told myself would be my next Sanderson book. So, with that, I give Elantris a 9 out of 10, and yeah, I would highly recommend it to anybody who's into high fantasy with good character writing, good magic systems, maybe not a lot of action. If you're into a lot of action, this may not be the book for you. But if you can deal with a lot more of the character drama and a little more politics in your fantasy, then I would say this is a book for you. And I highly recommend it. And yeah, it was a great start to my Sanderson catalog, and it made me a fan of his work, and I figured I would be, but it was just nice to know that I had this entire world of novels ahead of me after this. So I really look forward to reading more Sanderson novels. But yeah, that'll do it for this Sad Boys book review. Once again, my name is Dusty, and thank you all for listening. Take care.